Hello friends, welcome back another video of Jumana novel, this last episode of Book 1. Jumana had been absent from the safe, abandoned cave for 3 days. This absence stirred some curious questions within her. Was he still there, or had he left? And if he had left, where had he gone? Would he return to work with Aljathom, or would he seek a new life for himself? She could have gone to the cave unseen and found answers to these questions. However, she had promised herself to stay away from Bahar. She feared him, and feared growing attached to him, only to hurt him as she had hurt Mitham before him. Yet, despite her fears, the urge to check on him pressed heavily on her. There was only one person from whom she could get news about him. She went to the sage's house late at night. The lanterns inside were extinguished, so she refrained from knocking and entered. She walked until she reached a room from which strange sounds and murmurs emanated. Approaching, she peered through one of the door's cracks and saw the sage holding a sword, practicing combat moves. His face was more serious than she had ever seen, and from time to time, he shouted heroic phrases like, "I am not afraid. I am strong. A brave and legendary warrior." At that moment, she opened the door and entered. The moment he turned and saw her, he recoiled and screamed in fright. She had to calm him down. "Calm down, sage. Don't be afraid. It's just me." Embarrassed that she had seen him in such a frightened state, he retorted defensively, "I wasn't scared. That was a battle cry for combat. And in which moment of battle do you unleash such a cry? Exactly?" he admitted as he dropped the sword from his hand. "The moment the opponent strikes you." Then he sat down on the floor, and she joined him. "What's wrong? What happened? Why are you training for combat?" He was training to be strong like her, Ayub, and Bahar, but he didn't want to admit it, as it would expose his weakness and helplessness. So, he dodged the question. "How many times have I told you to knock before entering? The lights were off. I didn't know you were home. Besides, I came to ask about Bahar." He took a deep breath, then said in a troubled tone, "I have bad news about him." "What happened?" "His condition has worsened, but he recovered. I saw him rise from his sickbed. Don't forget that he exerted himself a lot." He began listing the things Bahar had done recently. "He lost a lot of blood. His foot died. He joined you on the journey to the land of the Phoenix while still unwell. Then death began spreading through his body. Yes, Jumana, he recovered, but his health has now deteriorated significantly." "Where is he now?" "In the cave," he said regretfully, then added, "He's bedridden, with no one to care for him." "And Ayub?" "He spends his days hunting for food, and his nights standing guard." Guarding him from what? Have you forgotten that Bahar and Ayub turned against Aljathom?" "You mean Ayub is protecting him from the organization's retaliation?" "Exactly. And why don't you take care of him? I am the sage of this village. I cannot be absent for long. People here need me." "What's the solution then?" "You go." "Me? No, I won't go. If you don't, his condition will worsen, and he'll likely die in the end." She fell silent, pondering a solution to this predicament. The sage noticed her inner turmoil and hesitation and asked, "What's wrong? Tell me." "Nothing." He urged her to speak, saying, "There are two people you should never lie to, your healer and your spouse. Since I am your future husband, you can tell me the truth." She responded with a playful smile, "Oh, wise one, I'm starting to believe you truly intend to marry me." This time, he remained silent, prompting her to ask, "What's wrong? Tell me." He replied hesitantly, "No, it's nothing." Encouraging him to speak, she echoed his words, "There are two people you shouldn't lie to, the healer treating you and your friend. Since I'm your friend, you can tell me the truth." Taking a deep breath, he admitted, "I can't marry." She looked at him sympathetically and said, "Poor you. You're not like other men, are you?" He quickly countered, No, wait, don't let your imagination run wild. I'm perfectly healthy and capable of marriage, but I'm simply not interested in it." "Why not?" she asked. "Because hearts become corrupted after they break. They're not fit for love again," he explained. "You speak as if you've experienced love before," she remarked. "Everyone has their story," he said. "Don't believe anyone who claims otherwise. To think that someone who banters so much and teases endlessly could say something this melancholy is surprising," she observed. Admitting something he'd never revealed to anyone before, he said, "Ever since I was let down once, I've used humor as a way to escape. But, my friend, those who laugh the most are often the saddest people on earth." "I never knew you were this gentle," she said. He replied with a playful smile, "Oh, when we get married, you'll discover even more delightful things about me." She smiled at his words, but he continued, "Now it's your turn. Tell me what's worrying you. I'll tell you later, but for now, give me the medicine, she said. So, you've decided to go to him? He asked. I have no other choice, she replied. He handed her a bundle of cloth containing the medicine and explained how to prepare it and administer it to him. As she prepared to leave his home, she said, my father once told me that true strength isn't measured by how much harm we can inflict on others, but by how much we can protect them from harm. So, wise one, you're not weak. You're a great force of good. In the safe, abandoned cave, he was lying on a pile of straw when he heard footsteps approaching. Too weak to move, likely due to illness, he spoke in a faint voice without looking up. You're back early today, Ayub? Jumana replied. Do I look like Ayub to you? Despite his exhaustion, he smiled upon hearing her voice. With great effort, he turned to her and said, not exactly, but there's a slight resemblance. Even when you're sick, you can't stop joking, can you? She said. What brought you back? He asked. To hear more of your heavy-handed jokes, she replied. If my jokes bother you, I won't make them anymore, he said. Though she feigned annoyance at his jokes, in truth, she enjoyed them. You don't bother me, she admitted. Really? He asked. She nodded, and he said, then I'll tell you the truth, without joking. You don't look like a you. You're slightly more beautiful than him. Shall I tell you the truth? Without joking, she countered. Go ahead, he said. Sometimes I think about poisoning you just to get rid of you, she teased. He smiled and said, that's fine. I'll die, and your tears will bring me back to life. She wagged her finger at him threateningly. Listen, your care might take a long time, so I don't want to hear such talk again. Didn't you say my jokes don't bother you? He asked. Let your jokes be funny, not flirtatious, she replied. Why do you think I'm flirting with you? He asked. I flirt with cows, not with you. You can't flirt with a cow. Do you know why? She retorted. Why? He asked. Because a brother doesn't flirt with his sister. A faint, sad smile crossed his lips as her words touched a hidden wound. He whispered, it seems we have a new wise one among us. Feeling guilty for her remark, Jumana apologized. Don't be upset with me. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Don't apologize, he said with a weak smile. It was a great joke. Then why has your expression changed? She asked. I just remembered something from long ago, he replied. Jumana took out a small pot from the cloth pouch. She placed water and herbs in it, as instructed by the sage, then lit a fire beneath it and waited. After an hour, she poured the medicine into a clay vessel and offered it to him. Drink this. It will give you some strength. He looked at the medicine without moving. She asked, what's wrong? I'm unable to move. He was nearly paralyzed. So, she adjusted his position, helped him drink from the clay vessel, then wiped his mouth from the remnants of the medicine and helped him lie back on the pile of straw. You need to rest to give the medicine a chance to work. If my presence here bothers you, you can leave, he added proudly. I can manage on my own. No, I'll stay to take care of you until you regain your health. And what about our agreement? Once you're better, we'll return to our agreement, and each of us will go their separate way. He nodded and whispered gratefully before falling silent. Thank you. At midnight, a question came to her mind that had been troubling her for some time. She carefully approached the topic. The slave market isn't a place children usually go to. It's a place for buying and selling slaves. What made a boy your age go there back then? How did you know about that story? Ayub told us. He didn't speak, so she asked again. Why did you go to the slave market at that age? You might not believe me if I told you. Try me. I'll try to believe. I went to ask one of the traders to sell me. Stop joking and tell the truth. I told you. You wouldn't believe me. Of course I won't. No one chooses to be a slave willingly. But I did, Jumana. Let's assume you're telling the truth. Can you explain why? I was cold. When someone is cold, they buy a coat or light a fire. The cold I felt back then was different. It came from within, from my heart, not the weather, he explained. I was 10 years old at the time. My family had left me long ago. I was tired of wandering and living as a vagrant. I knocked on doors seeking a family to take me in, but every house shut its doors in my face. The cold I felt, Jumana, wasn't one that a coat or fire could cure. It was the cold of longing for a family. Where did your family go? Why did they leave you behind? They died. How? The jinn killed my family. That's why I hate all jinn. His voice carried deep hatred, and she fell silent out of fear. She understood why he was earlier upset when she had joked. A brother doesn't flirt with his sister. Perhaps it had hurt him to hear his deceased sister compared to a cow. She wanted to change the subject, to talk about something else, but when she opened her mouth, her curiosity made her ask, why did they kill them? I was too too young to understand the reason, but I saw it with my own eyes. I was about 3 years old, belonging to a family known for their strength and skill in combat. But suddenly, a group of jinn killed them treacherously, without warning. They killed the entire family and left me behind, not out of mercy, but because my mother, with her dying strength, shielded me. She threw her body over mine and muffled my cries with her hand until the jinn had left. Later, no one in the village would take him in. They were afraid the jinn would return and destroy the family that sheltered him. Still, some villagers would leave food and drink on the ground for him, so he wouldn't starve. So he lived in the village's streets, alone and abandoned, like a pet deserted by its owners. When he grew older, around the age of 7, he began asking the villagers about the jinn who had killed his family. He wanted to know who his enemy was to prepare for revenge. But the villagers avoided him and refused to answer, afraid he would provoke the jinn and bring calamity upon them. When he lost hope in them, one night he set fire to all the village's homes and left forever. Since that day, he's been searching for that group of jinn to take his revenge. But because he never found them, he concluded that all jinn were responsible for killing his family and decided to kill every jinn he encountered. Jumana interrupted his story, asking, "But you work with Elephant Tusk and he's one of the jinn?" "He's the only exception." When they were younger, Bar and Ayub lived as vagrants, earning a living by carrying goods from the market to customers' homes. One night, as they were returning from the market, they were struck from behind and knocked unconscious. Hours later, they woke up in a strange place. It was a spacious room, at the end of which sat a man with sharp features and calm blue eyes. He said, "Come closer." Ayub whispered, "I'm scared." Bar replied in the same whisper, "Don't let anyone see your fear." Then, picking up one of his shoes, he added, "Follow me, rival." Both of them approached until they stood face to face with the man. Bar spoke to him with the tone of an equal. "Are you the one who kidnapped us?" The man smiled with admiration and said, revealing his reason for bringing them, "Lower your weapon, Bar. I am Tagine, the king of the Ababil kingdom, and I want you both to work with me." At that time, Tagine was seeking individuals to recruit into the service of Al-Jatham. He chose them for several reasons, including their youth, which made them more susceptible to mental conditioning, and the fact that they had no family, ensuring their loyalty would belong solely to him. As for Bar and Ayub, they saw working with the king of the Ababil kingdom as a golden opportunity they couldn't pass up. Little did they know that they were about to work for none other than the devil himself. The first thing they learned in the organization was that the blue-eyed leader had two faces. One face was Tagine, the king of the Ababil kingdom, and the other was Elephant Fong, the supreme commander of Al-Jatham. The most important secret, however, was that none of the people knew this truth. The two underwent rigorous training until they gained exceptional strength. During the training period, Elephant Fong focused first on brainwashing them and second on securing their absolute loyalty. Over time, they became fully devoted to him, carrying out his orders without hesitation or question. After proving their exceptional efficiency in completing assigned missions over a long period, Elephant Fong promoted them to commanders within Al-Jatham. Finally, Bar concluded his story to Jumana. "Tagine was the only one who embraced us when we were young." That was the story Bar knew. But the truth he was unaware of, and perhaps might die before discovering, was this: Tagine and his comrades from Al-Jatham were the very demons who had killed his family. She continued caring for him for nearly a month. Then, on the evening of the 29th day inside the cave, Bar said something strange. "I've seen the other world." "The other world?" "Yes. While my body was unconscious, my soul ventured to the realm of death." He continued while she listened attentively. "It was a peaceful, quiet place filled with serenity. I didn't want to return to life. Everyone who goes there doesn't wish to come back." "Then why did you return?" Without hesitation, he said, "For you." She raised her finger, reminding him of the agreement between them. He grabbed her hand and said, "I'm not joking. It's the truth. I returned for you." So far, his words seemed normal, but the peculiar part came next. The path back was dark and challenging. Jumana. It was like steering a small boat through a vast, dark ocean with no stars to guide the way. "We were lost midway." His use of the plural raised her curiosity, and she asked, "We? Was someone with you?" "Yes." "Who?" "A black man with an amputated leg. He saw me lost and decided to guide me." When she heard that description, her heart raced, and she asked, "Did he tell you his name?" "Yes, his name was Mitham." She fell silent, but her sharp eyes seemed to scream. "How did you find the way back to life?" He answered, "The scent of jasmine led us." "Your scent?" Bar, now recovered from his illness and able to move freely, got up from the hay pile. He walked steadily, then knelt before her. She looked at him with astonishment and said, "You're healed. You can move." He admitted, "My health never deteriorated. I was lying to you the whole time." While she stood in stunned silence, he explained why he had deceived her. "When you left and decided not to return, return, I realized you were serious. Ayub, the sage, and I devised this plan to bring you back here. Still silent, she listened as he confessed, I wanted to confirm my feelings for you, and now I'm sure of them. This young man, whose life had been consumed by battles and wars, found himself hesitating, anxious, and worried when the moment came to express his true feelings for her. The word love felt too heavy on his tongue, so he phrased it differently. My heart leans toward you. She remained silent for a few moments, but those moments felt like an eternity to him. He urged her to speak. Aren't you going to say anything? You lied to me for an entire month and made me look like a fool. She added angrily. You deceived me, and that's one thing women cannot forgive. I had no other choice. You left and decided not to return. No matter how noble you think your intentions are, you have no right to lie to others. Over the years, he had learned that apologizing didn't equate to weakness. Only the weak are afraid to apologize. He said sincerely, I'm sorry. There were no justifications, no explanations. His apology showed that he respected her anger and acknowledged it. Perhaps that was why her anger began to subside slightly. However, she wasn't calm enough to continue the conversation. She stood and said, this is the end between us. Then she walked away. It was the first time in his life that he admitted his feelings to someone, and he regretted doing so. He wished he could turn back time to kick the idea of confessing out of his mind and remained silent. Leaning his head against the wall behind him, he took a deep breath and allowed the words trapped in his chest to escape. Damn, it was a bad idea. Ayub emerged from a crevice at the far end of the cave and sat beside him. I told you not to do it, he said. Bayer closed his eyes, his head still resting against the wall behind him, as his mind wandered to the moment the night had taken her away. The memory of Gufran calling for help played in his mind. When I saw her for the first time, I felt like I knew her, Ayub, as if we had met in another time. He continued, I knew killing Gufran would be considered treason by Jathum's laws. I knew the members of the organization would turn against me, and yet I didn't hesitate for a single moment to save her. Ayub, piecing things together, replied, so, when you rushed to save her, it was as if you were saving someone you already knew. Yes, I wouldn't have done it for a stranger. Do you regret saving her? Ayub asked. No. Even if time rewound, I wouldn't hesitate for a single moment, even knowing the entire world would turn against me, not just Jathum. A long silence fell between them. Bayer finally turned to his friend, studied him for a moment, then stood up. It's time to say goodbye, my friend, he said. What do you mean? Ayub asked. You told me you wanted to quit working with Jathum. Here's your chance. And you? What will you do? I'll go back to my old life. I'm not like you. I don't have the motivation to leave them behind. Ayub stood and embraced his friend. Bayer's eyes welled up with tears, which fell onto Ayub's shoulder. It was the first time Bayer had cried since they first met in the slave market. Why are you crying? Ayub asked. Saying goodbye to you isn't easy, but I'm not leaving you. I'm coming with you. You fool. I thought you were saying goodbye to me. Ayub smiled, revealing white teeth with a single golden one among them. We started this journey together, and we'll either finish it together or end it together, he said. Wiping away his tears, Bayer replied. Then get ready. We'll return to Jathum at sunrise. Do you think Nab Alfil will forgive us for what we've done? Ayub asked. Don't worry. We'll figure out a way to convince him. Before sunrise, the wise man heard a knock at his door. When he opened it, he found Jumana standing there, holding out a gold piece engraved with the emblem of King Solomon's kingdom. I'll return once I've taken care of the book, she said, then turned to leave. He stopped her, saying, Jumana, I know you're angry with me. She continued walking without looking back. No, I'm not. Then why are you acting so distant? She turned to him, her tone sharp. Have I ever been disrespectful to you for you to find my respect surprising today? You knocked on my door. Usually, you don't show this much regard for my privacy, he replied. Why did you involve yourself in their plan? She asked accusingly. I didn't want to, but Bayer threatened to harm me if I didn't participate. You should have told me the truth that night. He wouldn't have known. Oh, but he would have known. Ayub was hiding in the next room, making sure I stuck to the plan. A woman who fears betrayal should never trust men, she said. Thank God I'm not one of them, he replied, then quickly corrected himself. I mean, I'm not like other men. She raised an eyebrow skeptically. I doubt that. What do you doubt? I doubt that you're not like the rest of them. He opened the door wider, gesturing for her to enter. Come inside, and I'll prove it. What will you prove? That I'm kind-hearted and trustworthy. Oh, sorry. I thought you meant something else, she said mockingly. You've got a dirty mind, he teased. Don't push your luck. I'm still mad at you, she warned. Lightning streaked across the sky, signaling an impending downpour. The wise man stepped aside, inviting her in. "Let's continue this conversation indoors," he suggested. "Sorry, I've got things to do," she replied. "What things?" "I need to perform my anger rituals." "What do you do when you're angry?" "I break things." "Go ahead, come in and I'll join you." "How will you join me?" "You break things and I'll curse people." That night, Jumana smashed many items in his home. While he stood on the couch, hands cupped around his mouth like a megaphone, alternately encouraging her and cursing Bayer and Ayub on her behalf. By the time she ran out of things to break, Jumana felt calm. She lay down amidst the wreckage, hands behind her head as a makeshift pillow, and confessed, "I feel like I've known him for a very long time." Seated on the now battered couch, the only unbroken item in the house, the wise man said, "Maybe you were with him in the pre-earthly world and made a pact with him there." She turned to him, intrigued. "What's the pre-earthly world?" "It's the realm where we existed as souls before descending to Earth. In that world, souls formed bonds and agreements with one another." "Do you mean Bayer might be the soul I made a pact with?" she asked. "I'm not sure, but it's the only explanation for why you feel so drawn to him, why it feels like you've known him forever," he replied. He added thoughtfully, "This idea of soul pacts might also explain the attraction or aversion we sometimes feel toward people." With a wry smile, he quipped, "Your mother and I must have been sworn enemies in that realm." "Why don't we remember these pacts?" she asked. "Perhaps the Creator made us forget for a reason, but he allowed our souls to remember, even if only faintly," he explained. Falling silent for a moment, she finally said, "I fear many things." The wise man noticed her hesitance to elaborate and reassured her. "Everyone has their own monster, a fear they must face. That monster can only be defeated when we talk about it with someone we trust. Do you trust me, daughter of emperors?" She nodded. "Then let's defeat your monster," he said. She took a deep breath and confessed, "I'm afraid of getting attached to him, only for him to leave. Everything I've ever loved leaves me behind. Life, my friend, is a grand story written by God with his pen. Each of us has a role to play, and once our task is complete, we exit the story and depart." Jumana took some time to ponder this wisdom. Life is a grand story written by God with his pen. Each of us has a role to play, and once our task is complete, we exit the story and depart. When her silence lingered, he urged her to confess. "Tell me, what else are you afraid of?" He hates the jinn. Not just that, he works with the Ivory Fong. They consider the Emperor's family their greatest enemy. How can I be certain my family will be safe if I tell him about them?" She added, "I can trust him and risk my life with him. If I'm wrong, I alone will bear the consequences. But I cannot let my entire family bear this burden with me. It's better for this story to end before it even begins." When she finished voicing her fears, the sage replied, "It's a shame for two hearts to part over trivial considerations." Trivial? Are the things I mentioned trivial? Over the years, you'll come to realize that the reasons that made you leave were nothing but trivial matters that could have been solved or overcome. But do you know what will be your curse? What is it? When you discover that regret will no longer serve any purpose, what do you advise me to do? The sage leaped excitedly from his seat, as though divine inspiration had descended upon him at that moment, telling him a dear friend would appear in the future when clay meets fire. He exclaimed, encouraging her to take action. "Must he know you're a genie, and that the emperors are your family? I don't want my relationship with him to begin with a lie. Everyone has a secret they hide from others. No one knows our complete truth. No one sees the darkness within us. No one knows how many masks we must wear every morning, one after another, to hide our reality from others. Everyone claims to hate lies, but the truth is, everyone lies. Without lies, people would lose each other. So you're advising me to lie to him about who I am?" "Yes. Don't tell him you're a genie," he added. "Many in this world die before finding the soul they made their pact with. If you found it, never let it go. Fight to stay with it." The sun had risen an hour ago when Jumana reached the cave, only to find it empty. She looked around, but there was no sign of him. She realized he had left. She almost followed him by teleporting but hesitated. She feared he might discover she wasn't human, or worse, that Taken or one of his allies might be there and see her, causing a disaster. She deeply regretted her delay in making a decision. He was gone now, and she didn't know if she would ever see him again. As she stood there, a voice came from behind her. "I was certain you'd return." When she turned around and saw him, she knew it was him, the soul with whom she had made her pact. She confessed, "And my heart inclines toward you too." He had seen many women in his life, but each one he encountered was like a letter or a word in a line of poetry. Yet, she alone was the complete poem. But because he wished her well, he warned her, as though protecting her from himself. I am a bad man, Jumana. I have killed, burned, destroyed, shattered, and harmed many innocent people without mercy or pity. I am a man with a reserved seat in hell, and even the devil himself seeks refuge from me. If I had a daughter, I would never give her to someone like me. You say this as if you want me to leave, she replied. I want you, he said, but I also want you to think. She believed that even the most corrupt hearts could be reformed if granted trust and a second chance. So, she said to him, my life with you begins from this moment, and your past is no concern of mine. Then, she made a request. Let us not look back. Those who dwell on the past stumble in their steps. Hearing her words, he valued her trust and made a solemn promise never to return to working with the Gotham organization. That promise marked a fresh beginning for them. The two lived for an entire year in the cave. During that time, they came to understand and discover aspects of each other they hadn't known before. One of the things he discovered about her was her deep love for storytelling and her unshakable belief in the truth of the phrase she would say at the end of every story. Remember, God answers the call of those who call upon him. At first, he didn't care much for those words, but over time, they seeped into his subconscious. Little by little, he began to believe them. Eventually, he would ask her every time, what call? She would smile and reply, any call. She, in turn, discovered that despite his blood-stained, evil past, he had an extraordinary talent for drawing. One day, she told him, look at how talented you are. Let me show you, he replied. I can draw you my future and let you see it. She didn't understand his meaning until an hour later when he handed her the drawing. It was a portrait of her. In truth, his words weren't just a phrase. I can draw you my future was his indirect way of telling her she was the one he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. A month later, on a night when the full moon illuminated the entrance to the abandoned, safe cave, he said to her, Jumana, I've done all the terrible things in life that guarantee me hell's wide gates, but I never imagined I'd be wicked enough to consider marriage. Why would you want to marry me, then, if you think marriage is evil? She asked in astonishment, tinged with anger. Because I love you, he said, adding, I, the sinner in everything, want you to admit me into your hell. That night, Jumana told him marriage required time and thought, asking for some time to make her decision. In truth, she didn't need time to decide. She had already agreed. But she wanted time to inform her family and allow the elders of the emperors to hold their council. The next day, under the light of blazing fires, her family convened an urgent meeting in the forest to discuss the matter of their royal-blooded daughter marrying a human being. Jumana felt an overwhelming heaviness in her limbs and exhaustion like she had never experienced before. She felt weak, powerless, like an insect drowning in a cup of water. Everyone around her looked at her with contempt and disdain, except for Tara. Despite Tara's sympathy, there was a task the elders of the family and Minister Kaizarin expected her to carry out. Tara approached her and encircled her with her massive body covered in rough scales. Jumana, not knowing what was about to happen, asked, what are you doing, Tara? I'm taking you out of the dark forest. You no longer have the right to remain here. Jumana surrendered to this truth, but made one final request. I want to say goodbye to my father. Minister Kaizarin interjected. You no longer have a family here, and Jabbar is no longer your father. Jumana looked around, like a lost child in a crowded market searching for her family. Even though she had lost the strength of the jinn, her heart told her her father was near, watching. With tears of pleading welling in her deep, dark eyes, she asked, won't you hug me one last time? Her father did not appear. Perhaps he wasn't there to hear her. She cried out in a trembling voice, I just want to say goodbye. But her weak voice did not carry far. Still, she screamed again, turning frantically as if searching for a branch to hold on to. Won't you embrace the girl you said you loved more than anyone? Minister Kaizarin gave her orders to Cobra, the jinn snake. Take her out of the forest, she commanded coldly, and if she enters again, kill her. Tara had no choice but to obey the higher-ranking jinn. She carried Jumana and crawled with her toward the edge of the forest. When they reached the exit, Tara gently released her and said, May God be with you. Jumana tried to summon her strength to overpower the guard and re-enter, but her new, fragile state failed her, and she collapsed. Tara pleaded with her, Please leave, Your Highness. I am no longer a princess, Tara. You will always be my princess and my friend. If anyone tries to harm you, I will stand by you with all my strength. Do you know why? Why? Because anyone who harms my friend is my enemy. That is the law of friendship. Jumana stood up, patted Tara's massive face as if to bid farewell and thank her for her loyalty. Before turning away, she made one last attempt. If you can hear me, Father, please come out. I just want to say goodbye. Jabbar did not appear, and she realized he had abandoned her forever. She turned and walked away, unaware that her father was watching her from deep within the forest, his eyes filled with sorrow. In her despair, she couldn't return to the cave or remain in the open, vulnerable to thieves and wild beasts. She decided to go to her mother's house. When she approached, a fierce growl came from above. Looking up, she saw a reddish bird warning her not to come closer. She turned to leave, but the door opened, and her mother's voice called, "What brings you here? Can I stay the night?" Despite Taj's anger and disapproval, she allowed her daughter to enter. Taj said to the bird, "You can always seek refuge with your mother," then addressed the bird at Cleo. "Let her come closer." The next day, Taj informed her that all the members of the emperor's family had followed Jabbar, leaving only Tara to guard the forest. "And why didn't you leave with them?" Jumana asked. "I stayed to be near you." Jumana warned her mother, "If people find out you are a jinn, I won't be able to acknowledge you, visit you, or even call you mother. It is enough for me to breathe the same air as you, my daughter." To prove her sincerity and show she meant no harm, Taj handed Jumana a book titled The Interpreter, saying, "This book tells the story of Saba's resurrection. Take it and give it to the wise man as you promised." "Why are you doing this?" "Because I want a second chance. I told you I can't. I don't want you to acknowledge me. I just want you not to hate me." "And the wise man?" Jumana asked cautiously. "What about him? You won't harm him, will you? He talks too much and knows too much about us. Your second chance begins only after you swear not to kill him." Later, after Jumana left, Taj went to the room where her daughter had spent the night to check if she had noticed the note left under her pillow. Asterisk, "My daughter, I see you're clinging too tightly to this young man. In doing so, you walk toward your doom. Don't become attached to anyone, for love is the gentle twin of death." Asterisk. Underneath it, Jumana had written, Asterisk, "Your daughter has grown up, mother. She has the right to choose her own destiny." Asterisk. That evening, Jumana visited the wise man's house. When he opened the door, she said, "This time, I'm not angry with you, but I can no longer pass through the door as I used to." The wise man went inside, returned with an axe, and broke the door for her. "Next time, there won't be a door to block your way," he said. Jumana smiled at his gesture and handed him the book. "I've kept my promise to you today." The wise man noticed something in her other hand. "What's that cup you're holding?" he asked. "Poison. It's a potion of forgetting. Will it make me lose all my memories?" "No, only the recent ones." "Including you?" "Yes, including me. But you're my only friend. I don't want to forget you. Your friend no longer has the strength to protect you. My mother and I agreed that if you drink this potion, she won't harm you. Can't we deceive her?" "No, she's watching us now to make sure." Jumana extended the cup to him, saying, "Please drink it. I don't want her to hurt you." The wise man raised his left hand mockingly and shouted, "This is for you, Taj." Then, lifting the cup with his right hand, he whispered, "And this is for you, my friend Jumana." He drank the potion. The taste of the elixir of forgetting was bitter and sharp, like the taste of a moldy sock. It needed some time to take effect. The sage collapsed to the ground, his face drenched in sweat. Jumana sat beside him and said, "You and I are not friends. It's just that you and I are one Helena." The sage rested his head on her lap and whispered weakly, exhaustion overcoming him, "Perhaps I will forget you soon, but I promise you, no one else ever will." She asked, "Tell me, my soul. I know so much about you, but I don't know your real name." His breathing grew heavier as he muttered feverishly, "Promise me you won't tell anyone." She was puzzled by his insistence on secrecy, but said, "I promise. My father had vowed to name his daughter after his mother, but he only had me, a boy. Yet he still named me after her." "What did he name you?" "Salaf," he replied, then added, "But as we agreed, don't tell anyone." Jumana stifled a laugh, realizing the source of the sage's peculiarities. He noticed and said, repeating a line Mutham had once told her, "Laugh. God loves those who laugh." Jumana laughed, and he smiled, watching her. His eyes closed to the sound of her laughter. When he woke an hour later, he found himself alone at the doorstep of his house. He couldn't remember anything that had recently happened. All he could recall was telling some girl who had knocked on his door, "You must be the daughter of a fine cow, or you wouldn't be this white, like milk." But he couldn't recall her face or anything about her. Rising to his feet, he turned to find his door shattered. Anger overtook him as he exclaimed, "May your hand wither, whoever broke this door." Then, picking up a book, he added, "I need to call a carpenter to fix it." In a secluded, abandoned cave, two friends sat face to face, deep in a serious conversation. "But I promised her I wouldn't return to the nightmare." "I mean it. Can you promise her the nightmare won't return to you?" "What do you mean?" "I mean they won't leave us alone, Bahar, and you know it well. It's been over a year without any of them appearing. That's what's most frightening." Bahar grew agitated. "Why didn't you speak up earlier, Ayub? Why now? I thought thought it was just a fleeting whim, but now that it's escalated to marriage, I must give my advice." Bahar hesitated, struggling to make a decision. Ayub revealed a harsh truth Bahar already knew but had chosen to ignore. "No matter how much you think you've escaped your past, it will haunt you for the rest of your life. If you truly love this girl, let her go. Don't drag her into this." Maybe Ayub's right, Bahar thought, then resolved. "She must leave." "Aren't you going to say goodbye before she leaves?" Ayub asked. "She said she would think about the marriage. Whether she agrees or refuses, it's better I don't hear her answer." As they prepared to leave, Jumana appeared. Her face radiated hope, and joy resonated in her voice like vines climbing the trellis. "I agree," she said. Her happiness at returning to him was like that of a migrant returning to their lost city after years. Bahar was that city, unable to close its gates to her. He couldn't let her down or confess he was about to leave her. She was like sunlight at the end of a tunnel, and he set aside his fear of the dark, running to embrace the sun. Ayub wasn't offended that Bahar ignored his advice. He knew that true friendship meant giving advice without expecting it to be accepted. His duty as a friend now was to support Bahar's decision, even if it opposed his own beliefs. He approached the couple and said, "Congratulations on your marriage," then added, "If only I had some money to give you a gift." Jumana leapt up and said, "You can give us a gift without needing money. I'll do anything for you both." "Anything?" "Yes, anything." "All right," she said, walking out of the cave. "Follow me." She led them to the graves of Al-Jassasa and instructed them to remain silent, not because the dead were resting, but because she wanted to surprise someone buried there. She stopped at a grave and said to Ayub, "Our gift is for you to forgive your father." Despite his tough exterior, Ayub was a well of sorrow, betrayal, and pain beneath the surface. He had hidden his wounds so well that no one could hear his heart's cries. He turned to leave, unable to offer such a gift, but Bahar stopped him, saying, "Your father caused us to meet, Ayub. If he hadn't sold you that day, we would never have crossed paths. Doesn't that count for something?" Their meeting wasn't a coincidence, but rather a divine mercy for their hearts. Finally, Ayub closed his eyes, recalling his father chasing after the caravan, pleading, "Forgive me. Please say you forgive me." "I forgive you, father," Ayub said. Jumana smiled, imagining her late friend Mutham's dimple forming on his left cheek as he watched them from the heavens. Bahar and Jumana married and settled in an old clay house that had belonged to her friend Mutham. Their life together was like that of any married couple, sometimes peaceful, sometimes filled with quarrels, but they both knew that life was only beautiful when they were together. For work, Bahar and Ayub returned to their childhood trade of carrying and delivering goods from the market. The pay was meager, but it was sweeter than the vast sums they once earned through sinister deeds. As for the happiest day in Bayer's life, the one where he felt as though his heart might leap out of his chest from sheer joy, it came about 7 years after his marriage. Specifically, it was the day Jumana brought him the news of her pregnancy. In preparation for providing a good life for the coming child, Bayer decided to expand his sources of income. He and Ayub stopped transporting goods from the market to customers' homes. Instead, they began renting large caravans, filling them with merchants' goods, and transporting them from one village to another. They took it upon themselves to protect the caravans from bandits and highwaymen, and this work brought them substantial earnings. However, this new line of work often required Bayer to be away from home for days or even weeks at a time. Each time he returned, he would tell his wife, "In your absence, your scent reached me, Jumana." When she heard this, a childlike wonder would shine in her eyes, and he would add, "You are the jasmine garden whose fragrance follows me wherever I go, binding me and pulling me back like a prisoner of war." Life went on peacefully until that night came. It was a moonless, starless night. Jumana had just entered her 5th month of pregnancy. While she and Bayer were choosing a name for their child, someone knocked at the door. Bayer got up to answer, saying, "It must be Ayub. I'll see what he wants and return to you." His absence at the door stretched longer than expected. Jumana got up to check on him, but he was nowhere to be found. Initially, she gave him the benefit of the doubt, thinking something urgent must have come up, leaving him without the time to explain. But hours turned into days, and then days into weeks. Her fear deepened when she went to Ayub's house to ask about her husband, only to discover that Ayub had disappeared as well. Only God knew the depth of terror that infiltrated her heart and the icy despair that settled in her soul. A forgotten ship sinking in the depths of an unknown ocean. What upset her even more was how life continued its natural rhythm in her grief, day following night, unceasing, as if mocking her pain. It made her feel as though, with all her anguish, she meant nothing to the world. Despite the haunting thoughts that attacked her day and night, her fear, insomnia, and the physical weakness brought on by pregnancy, Jumana resolved not to surrender to her darker imaginings. She decided to wait for him, no matter how long his absence stretched, even if it lasted a lifetime. His absence grew longer, and whenever she missed him, she would lift her head to the sky and gaze at the moon, thinking that perhaps he was looking at it at the same time, their gazes meeting in the distant heavens. On nights filled with longing, she would talk about him to the shooting stars, meteors, and celestial spheres, telling the stars, one by one, that he was the dearest, closest, and most beloved thing to her heart and soul. For months passed without any sign of Bahar. During this time, Jumana became acquainted with some of her neighbors, women she used to avoid when she was full of energy. She formed friendships with them to ease the weight of her loneliness. One day, as she was returning from the market in Al-Jassasa, her foot struck a protruding stone and she fell, her belongings scattering across the ground. Burdened by the pain of pregnancy, she couldn't move from where she had fallen. People walked past her, and carts drawn by horses and donkeys passed by without anyone paying her any attention. Suddenly, a hand reached out to her, and a voice said, "Let me help you." When Jumana looked up, she saw that it was a young woman, a familiar face. After focusing on her features, she recognized her. It was Maria, the girl she had saved from 4 bandits in the cave years ago. Maria helped her to her feet, gathered her scattered belongings, and said, "Let me escort you to your destination, my lady." Maria accompanied her home and insisted on staying with her in the coming days to help with the childbirth. However, Jumana refused the offer. Her refusal wasn't because she felt uneasy about having a stranger in her home, but because she didn't want Maria to feel obliged to help out of pity or as repayment for a past favor. Maria seemed to read her mind and said, "My mother, Attica, was the midwife of Al-Jassasa village. I inherited this skill from her. If I stay to assist you for a few days, I won't be doing so out of pity or gratitude. It's simply my profession." Jumana was convinced but made one condition. "If you're going to do this work, you must accept payment in return." Maria, knowing she would be turned away if she refused, said, "Very well, I agree." Maria stayed for several days until the anticipated day arrived. She brought along the tools she might need for the delivery and prepared the house for the newborn's arrival. "Lie here, my lady," Maria said, pointing to a clean mattress on the floor. Jumana lay down. Maria removed her clothes to avoid soiling them with blood and covered her upper body with a blanket. Jumana, feverish and drenched in sweat, murmured, "I'm so scared. I don't think I can do this." Her heart pounded as though a herd of wild horses was galloping toward the sun within her chest. Maria said, "While you may feel defeated, thinking life has overwhelmed you, leaving you lonely, lost, and neglected, there are those who see you as a hero, a role model, and an inspiration." Taking Jumana's hand, Maria added, "When my mother encouraged me to learn midwifery, I resisted. I thought dedicating my life to helping others was silly and pointless. But the day you saved me from those bandits in the cave, I realized how extraordinary and beautiful it is to lend a helping hand. Since then, you've been my role model and inspiration. Let's conquer this fear together. We are much stronger than we think." Those simple words restored Jumana's confidence and filled her with strength. With her eyes shining, not with the fire of despair, but with the light of hope, she said, "Let's do this, Maria." Maria began preparing her for delivery, offering advice and instructions. As the moment drew near, she said, "Now smile, my lady. Your child is about to enter this world." An hour later, the child was born. But this was no ordinary baby. He did not emerge from his mother's womb crying like other newborns. Instead, he was silent, his eyes wide open, gazing in wonder at the world as if astonished to discover a planet beyond the dark, narrow place he had lived in.